Welcome to the Unfettered Wealth Podcast with Eric Tashlein from Connecticut Capital. In this podcast, we help business owners and successful professionals plan for better wealth outcomes. Join us for this journey where we explore ways to help you identify better wealth decisions to help you achieve an unfettered life. It's time to ask yourself, what do you want more of?
Hello and welcome to Unfettered Wealth with Eric Tashlein. Good morning, Eric. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Eric. How are you?
Oh, man, I'm really excited about today's podcast because you sent me notes ahead of time, and we're dealing with kids today. And I kids are something that I've worked with for a long time, and that's kind of where my heart is, watching kids grow up and helping to form their ideas and some of the things that they work on as they grow. Man, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, no, for sure, right? I mean, part of launching our kids into the universe, right, and having them as responsible citizens entails, doing well with their finances, right? And, my biggest fear with my own children is that I end up with that one, the one that you always hear about, right?
Yeah.
And it's frustrating, I think, when you talk to parents like, yeah, this kid just spends and, has a large credit card bill and almost at that point, it's too late, right? I mean, I think you really need, finances and children, I think it's something that needs to start as early as possible.
Absolutely. I personally was terrible with money, Eric, when I was younger. I had a paper route and I made good money, for somebody who was in, junior high, 7th grade and 8th grade, whatever it was. And I wasted so much money. And I remember specifically one time my dad and I were at the airport. We were going to pick up my mom. She was coming back she had to go see some family. And I had some change in my pocket or whatever, and I was like flicking pennies and things, and I flicked a dime, right? And flicked a dime and went down the escalator and going down the stairs. I thought it was funny. What are you doing? My dad's like, what are you doing? So, it's just a dime, right? He just about lost it, because he knew the value of money, and I just was like, whatever. Sure. I buy donuts, I buy whatever with it. But I just didn't understand, the true value of money and what it meant to save or any of that stuff. So I had a lot of habits to break.
Good. I mean, good for you that you kind of learned from some mistakes and self-corrected, which is huge.
I tried. It took me a while, but yeah, it was definitely a journey. But when you thought about doing this topic, what really brought this to your mind? What was the driving force?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I'm having these conversations with my children. I have a daughter who's a senior in high school. Mm-hmm. And next year, she'll be heading off to college. And as soon as I'm going to say sorority, or you're in the hall that you're living in, you start getting all these credit card offers, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And that can be good or bad. And I think, establishing credit for somebody in college is a good thing. What we've been doing with her lately is just saying, when a credit card bill comes in and she has access to one of my wife's credit cards, we kind of go over it and say, all right, well, here are some expenses that we're going to cover, and here are a few that are on you, and you're going to need to cut a check to us for X amount. And she doesn't like that. She gets, kind of upset, but that's, I'm like, that's reality. I mean,
yeah. And it's tough sometimes, right? Reality is not easy.
Oh gosh, especially, for teenagers. She loves going to Chipotle. And I see Dunkin' Donuts in the car more often than I'd like.
Oh yeah, and that was my vice, big time. When I was younger, was donuts. I loved them. So you would have found lots in my room, and I'm sure I hid some from my parents because they knew I shouldn't be buying those. But doggone it, I had all that money, so why not?
Yeah, so hopefully, fingers crossed. I think she'll be okay.
Yeah.
And so, a couple things just for parents to think about that are listening. I mean, there were a few studies done at University of Cambridge that suggest that kids, the relationship to money is formed by 7, which is earlier than I thought. Which is kind of interesting. And then, on the teenager front, I think creditcard.com came up with a study. It said 1 in 4 teenagers said that their parents really never taught them anything about money, which is kind of scary.
Yeah. Well, I know that the previous generations, a lot of times they didn't want to talk about money. It wasn't proper. And I think that they waited till people were young adults to have that conversation with them. And like you said, if the relationship with money is formed by age 7, if you're teaching your kids talking about money is taboo, or that you don't talk about money, then that's a problem because you're just avoiding it and they're not going to understand it. So what do you think we should be doing, before the age of 7 to help kids realize what money truly is and how it works and the importance of, and not to put too much stress on it?
Yeah, so I think it's just important to have conversations, right? I mean, ultimately we want to be good role models for the kids, hopefully. You have to teach kids, where does money come from? And in most cases, it's coming from hard work. Mm-hmm. And I'll speak to them from an early age and say, hey, when they ask for something, I'll say, we can consider it. But in this particular case, the Disney vacation you're talking about might mean that dad's 2, maybe 3 weeks of work, depending on the vacation or what the purchase looks like. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to commit 2 or 3 weeks of my work life to make that happen. And just hopefully they get that. I mean, my parents always used to say that money doesn't grow on trees, and I never really got that.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to give them some concrete examples. It's funny, last night I was in the car with my youngest daughter, who you've spoken to before.
Yeah, Sophia. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's doing well.
She's brilliant.
And she's funny. Yeah, Yeah, she's an interesting kid, and both of them really have a good sense of humor, thank God, which hopefully will carry them both well in life. But I said to her last night, I was like, listen, someday, gosh, she's not going to be out of college for a long time with inflation. I was like, someday, let's say that you're out of college and you're earning $100,000 a year at some point in your life, and she's like, oh, that sounds good. I said, so talk to me a little bit about your spending of that. And I was, kind of leading the witness a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, by the way, there's something called taxes. And she's like, what are taxes? And I was like, well, likely what's going to happen is on that $100,000, you're going to have to pay about, $25,000 maybe or more to the government. She's like, oh, I don't like taxes.
Good girl. That's right. Sophia, I knew I liked you.
And so we talked about that, and then we talked a little bit about saving. And I said, ideally, if you can, especially at a young age, because things get complicated when you're older and you have a house and kids. I was like, try to save $15,000 a year of that if you can. And the rest of that's going to go to you're living your life and rents and so forth. And I said, some of it should go to charity too. And part of that gift, the gift giving might be to, friends and family for birthdays and so forth. So it was kind of fun. And I did that. I knew I was having this podcast. I just wanted to see how she'd react to all that. So it was a good conversation to have with your child.
Yeah, I actually saw a video just recently of a dad and his 2 sons, I believe it was. The boys were in the back seat, and the youngest boy was opening up his first paycheck from his part-time job. And he opened that thing up and he's going through it, and his face just dropped over and over. And he's like, well, what's FICA? What is this? What is that? And his dad's just rolling because he's like, son, welcome to the world, welcome to the real world. You always have this idea, okay, I'm making, $10 an hour. I'm working 20 hours this week. I have $200. No, you don't.
That's awesome.
You really don't. And so that's a tough lesson to learn at that age. So the fact that you had that conversation with Sophia, obviously, that you need to be having this conversation nice and early, because you don't want that situation where they're disheartened from their work. They want to be able to enjoy their work knowing that they have these other obligations and bills and things that they have to do, as far as taxes and all. But man, it's it is a tough conversation to have on all those different age levels, right? Because I'm thinking I'm still back on under 7, right? When you're under 7 years old, most of your money's coming from birthday money or from grandma and grandpa visiting, or, if you have my wife, Nana will give you pretty much what you want, as the grandkids. So it is difficult. And I'm just reflecting on my grandson. He just thinks money does grow on trees, or it grows in Nana's purse, so if we're at the store and we want something, we just ask, and so it's tough. So how do you deal with under 7? What can you put in place besides the, conversation? Because I don't know, under 7, do you talk to him about taxes?
Not at all. No, okay. It's just,
I don't want to have that conversation with him. Yeah.
I think for if you're under 7, I mean, I've seen some great ideas online and other articles in the past. And basically, having 3 piggy banks, I think is a great idea.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And especially if they're clear. I mean, the old ceramic piggy banks, I don't think are as impactful. And, what they suggest is, getting 3 clear jars and, right, saving on one and spending on a second one. And lastly, the third one's giving. Mm-hmm. And, to allot a certain amount for each category, and that's something you can come up with within your own family in terms of your belief system and so forth. But I think that's great. And, our kids have had piggy banks, and it seemed to work well.
Yeah, we actually had, this is going years back now, but I totally forgot about that until you said it. We actually had it was a clear bank that it was thin, and so it had 3 storefronts is what it looked like. And the one on the left was a store, and it said store on it, on the little sign on it. And then the middle one was bank. So that was your savings. And then the one on the right was actually the shape of a church. And so it had church on there. Well, that was obviously giving. But that was for our personal,
that's awesome.
That's how we did it. But they would put money in each one of those according to the percentages that we would set aside and talk to them about. And they understood it and they learned it. And they knew that they could take the money out of the store one and anytime they wanted to, right? Anytime we went to the store, you can get this money out of the store one if you want. But the one for savings, they had to have a specific goal for that. If they wanted something specific, like we would go, on a vacation and trip down to Texas or wherever to see family. If they want to save up some money for the trip because we're going to go to a Worlds of Fun, for instance, and they want to buy a souvenir or something, they're going to have to save for that. That's not something you're just going to have in the store money. So it really did set a foundation in that situation. I totally forgot about that bank till you brought up the 3 bank idea.
Yeah, no, I think that, I was just thinking, as you're saying that, and I think that's awesome that they had that. I think about some of the purchases. You talked about kids' goals and what they want to buy. And probably what I should do is, both of them have in their rooms, there's things they definitely bought that they never ended up really using.
Exactly,
And so I probably should point that out and to say, hey, listen, as you accumulate savings, just really think about those purchases, right? Maybe you take a day, the good advice for adults is if it's going to be an emotional purchase, maybe you take a day before you actually buy it, right? Because in the end, there's a lot more stuff than I care to admit that's sitting around the house that they never really used.
Oh, yeah. Well,
yeah. And we're guilty of it too.
Oh, yeah, totally. I was just going to say, you and I have spoken before, take the no man, right? If you're going to go to look at a major purchase, my wife and I made this mistake of not taking a no man or a no woman that could go with us and tell us, look, you need to take a day and think about this, because we ended up leasing that minivan for $280 more a month than we had originally budgeted for, because it had all the bells and whistles and we got caught up in the moment, blah, blah, blah. And we just made a dumb decision. And that was as adults, so how can we expect kids to make better decisions when they don't have all the information that we do? And we just ignored it, obviously. So let me ask you this. I'm curious now. When it comes to like the 3 bank idea, we know that birthday money is one thing. What about allowance? What do you think about that?
You know what? I think some people get allowance for breathing, right? And
Yes.
right, it just doesn't it doesn't really translate if you're trying to, if you want teachable moments, right? So I've seen some parents pay on a per job basis, or they'll pay an allowance, and there's certain strings that are attached to it, and if they don't complete the chores, then you take the money back, right? Which I kind of like. It's kind of like being a hard ass parent, which I kind of like. And so I think that's a good. Yeah, I just think getting arbitrary amounts of money doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I'm going to add one thing to that. In the work that I've done over the years with kids, a lot of it was behavior modification and just helping them to form good behaviors. One thing that I would say to every parent listening is that when your kids are doing chores, the one thing that's very difficult to remember to do is to praise them, right? And I would say that is the first and foremost thing that you want to do. When they're doing a chore, when they've completed their task, make sure that you're telling them how proud you are of them. Make sure that you're telling them that they've done a great job. If you have to give them corrective feedback on something, maybe their job is to vacuum the living room, and you can see that there's vacuum marks, but they didn't get the entire floor. Tell them, hey, great job. I see that you've been vacuuming. Let's look at this area over here. Let's make sure we're hitting all these corners. give them that feedback so that they can grow in their responsibilities, they can grow in the jobs that they're doing and do a better job. But I think that the positive reinforcement of your praise and acknowledgement is the strength that they need to have before the money, right? Before the monetary gain.
Sure.
The allowance, the reward for doing those tasks, that is, that's an easy way to teach them about money. But the words that you say are, I truly believe, the most important, because that gives them the sense of pride, where the money gives them that reward that then they can look forward to, having that special treat. But that also continues a behavior of understanding that if I work hard, they may not always get praised from a boss, but at least they'll have that self-accomplishment that they feel in that moment that you've given them that praise.
No, those are great points. So thank you for adding that in. Those are awesome. It's funny, we were talking about memories and thinking back in our past and, thinking about our children as well. And, one thing that I still vividly remember as a young kid was having a simple bank account. It looked like a dark blue bank savings passport almost. It was really tangible. And you'd go in, and I had a paper route, and I don't know, I feel like I've been working since I was 10. I don't even know if that's legal. But it was cool because you'd go in, you're like, wow, my account's up or it's down if I've spent too much. But it was just neat having, and I think some banks still offer those, but just not as much. But I think having savings accounts, although they're really not paying anything these days, is a great idea.
Yeah, and again, you're absolutely right. It gives you that tangible thing that you're holding on to or that you can go see. And now I'm sure that there are all sorts of apps and things that young people can use as well, and they'll have it on their phone. They can see what their account looks like, and yeah, well, I'm sure technology has changed slightly since we were kids, just a bit.
Don't remind me how old I am. And the other thing too, which I was really, I as a parent, I do a lot of things wrong, admittedly. But one thing I felt like I did well last year was my oldest daughter was, had taken on a job basically, and she had earned income. And we started a Roth IRA.
Nice.
And in her case, gosh, hopefully she'll have, who knows when she'd even think to start using it. But you're talking about multiple decades of growth, hopefully. What a great teachable moment. Listen, she had saved, some of what she had earned. She had spent a decent amount because she had certain things that she needed to take care of. And so I funded the account. I think I put in $750. But I really felt like it was a worthwhile thing to do because we had these great conversations on investments and stock. And I tried to put myself into the shoes of a teenager and said, what are some of the areas that she would understand? Obviously, so all the social media companies and all the tech companies she's familiar with, and some of the products she uses, and then also, where she eats and so forth. So, I think I gave her 12 different stocks to consider. And out of those, she chose 3, because we're not talking about a lot of money. And some of those stocks, I think she chose one where the price per share was just so much we couldn't do it anyway. Yeah. You could have bought a proportionate share. But, I tried to get 1 share of each stock. So it's been great. And, she gets to see it, the statement, we talk about it. And, I'm just hoping that down the road that she continues that on her own.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny because we're having the same conversation with my daughter. She's 21. She's setting up a Roth. Same thing. She understands that do you want to get taxed on the acorn or do you want to get taxed on the tree kind of concept? And I know you've spoken about that before. And so just being able to help set her up like that. And the best part was that she brought up the conversation. I was like, man, she's so much better with money than I was.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So obviously she's learned from her mother. So that's good.
That is great. Well, it's funny too. Like, you think about who were your influences growing up in terms of spending. And my wife and I were very fortunate in that. Well, maybe we weren't so fortunate, but our parents were all so frugal. And I definitely learned that rubbed off on me, not to the same degree that my parents were. But the saving regularly, you can spend, but you have to save, and my wife's the same way. And so I think we're fortunate. If you have a parent that is way out of control with their spending, I think it can be a negative for our kids.
Yeah,
for sure.
I've got a buddy of mine that it was almost the opposite effect. His mother spent a ton of money, and they always had, the nicest clothes. They always had everything that was in style, and we lived in the same neighborhood, and there was just no way, knowing what his, father did and mother didn't work, so on and so forth. Well, she was racking up credit cards left and right. And he saw that, and I think they had 5 kids altogether, and he was the oldest, and he became really, really good with money. Frugal with money, very guarded with money, but not overly. It wasn't like he went to the other far extreme, but he saw the devastation with debt and everything that happened to his family. He's like, there's no way I'm going to let that happen to mine. And
good for him
and his wife are brilliant with their finances. He is on track right now to retire at 55 years old if he chooses to, and it just, so, I mean, he's done the right thing, even though there was the wrong example when he was growing up. So, I mean, I've just watched him over the years thinking, man, how he was able to take that lesson and flip it was fantastic, because not a lot of people can do that.
That's great. In my house, my dad smoked cigarettes, and gosh, there was nothing really good that came from that. But I'm glad that I recognized early on. I'm like, gosh, I hate those things, and I'm never going to smoke. So sometimes you do learn from bad habits.
Exactly right. Yeah, absolutely.
On the budgeting front, what we do try to do with our kids, and I'd recommend to everybody, is just kind of go over, like we talked about earlier, just go over the bills. They can watch you paying your own bills, and you can talk a little bit about that. But in the case of my teenager, as I said, we'll go over each month her bills, and begrudgingly she'll cut us a check. And she's I think over time she's really learning to be a better financial student, which is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in today's day and age, it's hard to do that, to have the kids watch you pay your bills, because many of us do it online, right? But there's still the ability to sit down and show them, okay, this is how much mom and dad brought in, for the month. And now let's talk about what's going out for the month, and I love the fact that if you can do that, because we had to sit down with our son and do this at one point, because he needed to understand that we were paying for his baseball at the time. We'd paid for his football, earlier in the year, so on and so forth. And just them understanding that, okay, we have this that needs to come out. Here's the mortgage. Here's the electric. Here's the gas. Here's our travel expenses, just the car and so on and so forth. Here's your baseball that we're paying on a monthly basis, and you needed that new glove or a new bat or whatever. And seeing that they're part of the bills, understanding that children are part of the bills. It's an obligation that we have, but it's a joy. That we get to do these things, and we get to go to his baseball games. I was an assistant coach for all of his teams, growing up. That was joy to me, but it was still an expense. But that's where we choose to spend our money, right? Like you were talking about, we can't go to Disney every year because we do have obligations and bills. Well, we can't take lavish vacations because we choose the lifestyle that we choose. And we love doing what we do on a daily basis. We're not just going to spend $10,000 on a vacation and then not let you do the baseball, which you love, right? Things like that. So it's that compare and contrast, I think, that really shows kids, what's the lifestyle look like on a daily basis versus, one thing a year that's really, really fun, and then you're working the rest of the year to provide that.
No, I think that's awesome. I was just thinking as you were talking a little bit about baseball and hobbies and spending. My senior, who will be going to college, we've set aside money for college. She has an idea as to the type of career that she'll get into, and my next step with her, whether or not she's really going to want to listen to Dad on this, is here are your colleges that you've been accepted to. Here's the budget. I think one thing we've decided to do, which I think is good and solid, is that we are going to have her take out a federal loan each year for, I think they're on $6,000 each year, and it goes up a little bit. And if she does extremely well, I have no problem of paying that loan off, but I really want her to have some skin in the game.
Yeah.
Because we've all seen those kids at college that, everything was taken care of 100%, and they just, they made some poor choices on a daily basis.
Yeah.
the thought is with her is that, listen, we're going to go over here are the 6 colleges you've been accepted to. Here's the budget. If you go to this one, we're not going to discourage it, but you might end up having a small loan when you get out, or I don't know, not an exorbitant loan. But also, I think she's going to get into a career that may not be the highest paying. So she's going to have to weigh all these factors ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think setting them up from the very beginning, with the store, the bank, and the giving, that really kind of shows them, those priorities. What are you gonna do? Of course, when they get older, then they have that fourth building on their, Uncle Sam's house, the taxes that go in there. But we'll talk about that later when they're older. But no,
it's funny. It's funny. Like, our clients are all, really different, and, different backgrounds and so forth. But I think the underlying theme, I don't think anybody likes paying taxes.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. Not to end this on a bad note, but we know that money can, be a good thing and a bad thing if you learn how to use it, so on and so forth. As parents, we want our kids to have the best, but knowing that discipline is there, teaching them from a young age is so vitally important. We had a young man that lived with us for a while in the previous job that we did. We've talked about that. His parents basically threw money at him because they thought that was how he would be successful. And the last time I saw him, he was on salary, and I'm using air quotes. He was on salary. So in other words, he was on an allowance at 28 years old. His parents were paying him $200,000 a year for nothing, just to do nothing. And he spent that money on drugs, and that's where you just don't see the ramifications of what you're doing if you just give them everything they want. Teach them from that young age. Agree. Yeah, I 100% agree with everything you've said today. I love the fact that you're bringing this to the forefront. I hope people share this podcast because raising kids is not easy. We've both done it, and it's like there's all these decisions that need to be made, but teaching them and allowing them to understand the value that hard work and money has right from the very beginning, I think, is such a good foundation, Eric.
I appreciate you sharing that story. We've worked with wealthier families, and I think one thing that makes sense, if you're a very successful family and you're almost forced to make some gifts to kids. And, one thing that I've seen I think makes a lot of sense is that from an incentive basis is, so let's say your child graduates from college and they have a job paying $40,000 a year. Maybe what you do is you say, okay, well, based on your salary, I will give you X amount. So maybe you're giving 25% of the salary each year as an ongoing gift. And when they hit 50,000, it's a larger number. At least that way there's some sharing, and it's not just an outright gift where the child's going to be on sitting on the couch all day long. Which is really kind of sad.
It is, and it's. I love that idea, and a lot of times families have concerns because one child goes into a career that they make a very large salary, and another child chooses something. Maybe they want to be a teacher, which is an incredibly important skill, and obviously we need teachers these days, especially teachers that are doing all this stuff online. It's crazy. They're highly skilled, but they're still paid so low. So being able to supplement their salary by gifting them, and I think that's a great reward, even though they haven't chosen to be the doctor or the lawyer or whatever and making a large salary. They're still vitally important, and
Sure.
I'd love to be able to reward my child if they chose a profession like that and chose a smaller salary for a greater impact on young people or nurses, things like that. That would be great.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think, just there's so many areas we can get into on this. But I think one of the things I wanted to close with is just kind of the legacy, right? And I was speaking to a buddy the other day, and I was like, listen, as parents, right, as human beings, you can probably within your own family influence the next 2 or 3 generations, right? Your child, your grandchild, hopefully the grandchild picks up some of your thoughts and passes it on. So I just think that if you can pass on the legacy of smart financial decision making, at least to a few generations, I think that is part of living a really worthwhile life in kids making good decisions with all that they do.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's perfect to close on, Eric. Thank you so much. This is a great topic.
Yeah, no, thanks. I've really enjoyed it. I always enjoy speaking with you, Eric, for sure.
All right. Thank you, my man. And thank you all for listening to the Unfettered Wealth Podcast with Eric Tashlein. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Eric comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. And again, this is a great one to share. Everybody could use just a little bit of the nuggets of gold and advice that Eric gave today. I think are phenomenal for families that are just trying to figure this out, navigating how to talk about finances, how to really show kids the value of hard work and the value of the money that they receive, whether that's from gifts or the work that they do. So please share this. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at Connecticut Capital Management Group, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Unfettered Wealth Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Connecticut Capital. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. Content should not be construed as personalized investment, legal, or tax advice. Please consult your advisor, attorney, or tax advisor in regards to your individual situation. Eric Tashlein is an investment advisory representative of Connecticut Capital Management Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Connecticut Capital Management Group, LLC, and Connecticut Benefits Group, LLC are not affiliated.